welcome to Roll and Release. As you guys know, I love a theme. So today's theme is going to be hips. I have out all kinds of fun things. I have my foam roller out. I have an alpha ball. I have both of my sets of the balls in the bag, and I have a yoga brick. And we'll get ourselves moving and play. As always, use what you have. You can always improvise, always use a different ball depending on what you have and what you prefer. All right, we're gonna start laying on our foam roller. So get your roller, get it set up in a spot where you can put your hips down at one end, and then you can roll back onto your roller and just let your head be nice and anchored on there. All right, and I want us just to be here for a moment and just take a few big breaths. Take those, maybe a big Pilates breath, or maybe just a big breath, right? Big inhale, exhale, let yourself settle in, and maybe just do a little check-in time on your hips as we're here. I like to kind of wiggle mine around a little bit on the roller. So I'm doing what I would call a little side to side, a little wag my hips, and then come back to center. And then let's test out a little just tuck and arch on here. Feel free to pull your feet back towards you as much as you like. I have my hands on my hips. You can have your hands on the floor. A reminder when we're laying on the roller, the wider your feet are, the more stable you're going to feel. The closer in, the more balance work it'll be, so you can play with that. All right, I really want us just to do a little pelvic tuck and then an arch where we're tipping our pelvis front to back, essentially. You might feel like you're rounding your low back and pulling it into the roller a little bit. And then we'll tip our pubic bone away from us. Just notice your breath as we do these little rocks. No right or wrong how big they are. And what you'll probably find is as we start moving, that they might get bigger just because you get a little more ease in your back and in your hips as you rock back and forth. Let's do like 2 more of those. Just a little rock, appreciating our rolling that's happening, right? Can you feel how the roller's pressing into that sacral area back there? And then release. Okay, and then we're going to head into some pelvic circles, which are kind of extra fun when you're balancing on your roller here. You're gonna do a little pelvic tilt. You're going to shift your hips towards your right. You're going to tip away into your arch, your little tip your pubic bone away, shift left, and then come back into a tuck. So we're circling, and again, what I want us to find is kind of that massaging the sacral area as we do that action with our hips. Just circling them around in space. Let's take a couple more there. And then of course we'll want to go the other direction. So you'll just switch it and kind of tuck and then lean to the left, tip away into a little arch, lean right, come back into that tuck. And just explore some circles there. Definitely you'll feel like your whole body does a little shimmying and shifting on the roller, which is totally fine as long as you're feeling safe. Not going to roll off your roller. Good. And then let's come back to center. While we're here, let's do a little side bend. So we're going to take one arm up overhead. The other arm, I'm going to switch so you guys can see that. My other arm is on the mat. And so I'm going to just slide the hand that's on the mat down toward my heel and then reach the arm up overhead. So I get this side bending action, but my head is still on my roller and my hips are still on my roller. And then I'm going to come back to center and just alternate that. Play with just a nice big breath as you're doing that and feeling that bending through our spine. We're getting that side bending through our waist. You might get a little movement of that roller underneath your hips as you go side to side. Let's do big inhale, reach up and over. And then exhale back to center. Let's take one more on each side. And no right or wrong, it's just going to be your side bend. It's your time to explore a little stretch and move on that roller. One more time. And then come back. Good. All right, back to center. While we're here, we're just going to take a few arm circles because they're going to feel good. Big inhale, lift your arms up. Exhale, you're going to open and circle to come around. As you're circling your arms, you're letting those shoulder blades kind of wrap around the roller. But I also want you just kind of aware of like that sacral area in your hips and just letting that area kind of sink into the roller as we're doing these. Let's reverse our direction. Palms up, we'll inhale, reach the arms out, around, overhead, and then exhale, just press those arms along beside you. Big inhale, we'll reach, reach, reach. And then an exhale to come back down. Let's get one more in there. And back. Good, okay. Carefully come off your roller. I like a little just gonna lean off to one side, let that roller come out from underneath of me. And then we're gonna move our rollers under our hips. So see if you can just come into a little bridge position. Our feet and knees are about hip width apart. And pelvic tuck, push into the floor, lift your hips up, and just enough that you can slide the roller underneath your hips. Mine is really at the, I'm gonna call it the top edge of my hips, right across those hip bones. And when I get there, I'm just gonna make my legs comfortable. You can always go wider or a little narrower. I really just wanna hang a little bit. I want you to see what that feels like. So for me, this feels like the weight of my hips is kind of draping over my roller, and it's definitely putting some pressure into my muscles, or those glute muscles that come up across. Yeah, and just be there for a moment. Take a few breaths and see if you can just relax there. It gives us just almost like a little traction here. And it kind of lengthens and pulls out our spine a little bit. Let's explore some movement just with both feet here on the mat, like a kind of like a little knee sway. I would go nice and wide with your feet as you play with. Reach both knees over to your right and just play with maybe pushing a little bit extra with your left leg. So my hip actually lifts off my roller, and then I'm getting pressure in the bottom hip into the roller. And then stomach muscles pulling in as you come back center, and you're going to go the other way. Take your time on this. I just want you to kind of see what you feel. If you're like, oh, I might want my roller a little lower, a little higher, just adjust it a little bit. Come back center, go the other way. Nice big breath along the way. I'm just going to share what I'm feeling. There is not a right or wrong, and everybody is tight in different places, is going to feel things different ways. But just for your knowledge, like when I push, I get a stretch in these quad muscles. I can feel it all the way into that like deep psoas hip flexor muscle. Okay. And then on the other side, I'm getting that pressure. So it feels like my glutes get a little roll out. And just kind of going side to side. And the more I push with that outer leg, the more I get a little more front of the hip stretch. And again, not a right or wrong. I just want you to explore and have a little sense of ease as you're kind of going side to side, just like getting that movement, right? Our shoulders are anchored. We're getting a little twist and reach, shimmying our hips around a little bit. Yeah. A little side to side on there. Nice. Okay, let's come back to center. Next up, and again, everybody's different. You can play around with exactly where you want this roller. I want you to take your legs up to kind of a tabletop, little bent knee position, abdominal muscles pulling in to support you. We're going to do a little knee sway here. Now, this is good core work as well, but we're really focusing on that massagey part today. I want you to take the legs. I'm taking mine over to my right side and just reach the knees and feel the pressure of the roller. Now just go as far as you can go and keep your shoulders anchored, because if you go past that, you might like end up going too far and then coming back, or not be able to come back. And then we'll just alternate, reach the knees, just go to where your shoulders can stay anchored and just kind of explore. And again, if you're like, I might want that roller a little higher, a little lower, just play with it a little bit. Match your breath and movement. You don't have to match mine, but just have kind of a inhale as the legs reach. Nice slow breath. Exhale as you come back. And as always, if you get to a spot where you're like, oh, that is the spot, I found a place where I'm like, oh, I could just stay there, feel free to explore. Right? Sometimes I'll get into a place that just feels like it needs it, and I might like move my legs around. I might bring my foot to the floor, do a little wiggle or shimmy, and kind of just, we're really focusing on that roll and release piece of this little movement today. So I want you to play around with anything that might feel good for you. Maybe you have one leg up in space, one on the floor, that kind of thing. Just do a little exploring on there. Good. All right, let's come back to our center. And I want us to just play with a little bicycling. Start little on these. Appreciate that you have like some ease in your knees and in your hips, and you're just moving, got those core muscles turned on for sure. And just play with how far can you reach out and still kind of have that sense of ease, and start exploring, maybe finding some stretch in the top of the thighs and the hips. Yeah, you're just reaching, and you might get to that place where you could like touch your foot on the floor and come back in. If that's there for you, go for it. And if not, just stay where it feels good for you. And then try reversing it. I like to kind of start little when I reverse again and kind of work my way to a bigger range. Notice how a bigger range will feel definitely like some more core work, also tend to get a little more of the stretch. And then the whole time we're getting a little massagey work on our hips on here. Don't forget that breath. Good. Okay, and then let's just explore a stretch here. I'm going to take my left leg. Now, I'm going to hold mine, but you don't have to hold it. You could just like leave it up in space if it doesn't feel good to pull it back towards you. And then just stretch your right leg out and then let go. So my foot's going to touch the mat. My leg is bent. It's fine. It feels like a nice stretch. And you can play with holding this leg that's up and pulling it towards you if you want. You'll see, like if I pull my leg back, kind of lifts my leg up, right? I can't maybe get my leg down to the mat. And you can kind of adjust your stretch, we'll call it, on that. You can also do things like be here and kind of wiggle or roll around a little bit. Just take some breath. Really just noticing what you're feeling from a stretch and letting gravity kind of just do its magic. And just kind of gently pull down. You don't want an extreme stretch. Let's do a few more breaths just there. And we're just going to switch. We'll hug that leg in. If you want to hold it, great. Stretch the other one out and then just like let it hang. And maybe it touches the mat. Maybe it doesn't. I like to get to the place where I'm just relaxing as much as possible, because at first I really want to like hold my muscles when it's out there, because it can feel like a pretty big stretch, but I try to just get there and then think, okay, can I release? Can I not work? Sometimes for me that helps to like shake or wiggle my leg around. Sometimes I just have to think about it and relax. It depends on the day. Feel free to explore movement always. Circling this leg around. And remember, you don't have to hold that leg. You could just like bend your knee and just let it be there. That feels better. Just getting that lengthen and stretch that front of that hip. Taking a few big breaths on there. Good. And then we're gonna do one more thing on here. I call this my child's pose on the roller. So I like to open my legs nice and wide and just clasp kind of the backs of my legs a little bit. And then I'll just kind of slowly pull the legs, just let the weight of my arms pull the legs toward me. So this feels like a nice stretch for me and my inner thighs. Really nice on my low back. Again, I try to just relax into it as much as I can. You could play with the positioning of your hands. You can have them kind of lightly on your knees or shins. If it doesn't feel good to go that wide, you could do this with the legs closer in and explore there. Another way that I will do this is if you've done like the happy baby pose, where you kind of like hook your toes and hang on. And then I can kind of push out with my elbows. Just explore for a little bit and see what you notice. Take some nice breath. Usually as we hang out in these places, we kind of melt into them a little bit more. Not a right or wrong. Just kind of seeing what you feel. Let's do like 2 more breaths. Any of the positions. Just appreciating what you're feeling. And then we're going to go ahead and bring our feet back to the mat. Let's do a little bridge, lift our hips up, push the roller out, and then just roll back down. Maybe give your hips a little wiggle, see how they're feeling. We're going to move to alpha ball. I want us to do a little bit of our sacrum scrub. So, and again, if you don't have an alpha ball, this works with littler balls. It works with the balls in the bag. I'm going to lift my hips up and put my ball underneath my sacrum. This also works on the wall. So if this feels like too much pressure, you can take your ball to the wall behind your hips and do the same thing. So I'm going to start with my ball kind of centered on my sacrum, and then I'm going to slowly rock my hips side to side. We are really rolling across our bony sacrum surface, which there's a lot of surface area there. So explore. Maybe you're doing some circles. Maybe you're like doing a swipe across and then you like take it a little higher, a little lower. Just take your time, not too fast. Slow. Remember, when we do this roll release time is always the best. Gives that ball time to sink into those tissues, make some changes. When you're rolling, if you're getting all the way out to the outside edge of the bone, you'll kind of feel it. Let's start to feel a little more sensation out there. Those glute muscles kind of attach in on that sacrum out there, or in there. And feel free to explore any movements that feel good to you on here. Remember those tuck and arch and those pelvic circles we did on our roller. You can play with those with that ball. And of course, it'll have a different feel because we have a ball underneath of us instead of a roller. You can always just roll side to side, do tuck and arch, any of those things. Let's do just a few more breaths here. And then we'll take that ball out. Go ahead and come all the way down and just release hips. See how those hips are feeling. Do some little check-ins. While we have our roller, we're going to do our QL. So this is that we'll do one side at a time. It is that little muscle that kind of runs from the top of our hip bone to our rib cage. You can find it you can do this all laying on the mat, but I'll kind of come up and show you guys. So ball is on that top edge of your hip bone. I like to start kind of right on my side waist. It's nestled in between my bottom rib and my hip. And then I start kind of rolling, pushing in a little and rolling center until I feel like I hit that band of muscle that lays beside my spine. right? And then on that outside edge of that band is kind of where we're getting that ball. And then I might just be there. If you're on the right side, play with opening up the right knee to get more pressure. You decide how much. You can use your left leg to kind of control your movement. So if you want to shimmy, do a little press and shimmy up and down. You want to rock side to side, maybe going like into that pressure more and out of it. You can play with that. Notice that breath. Notice how sometimes just taking a bigger, deeper breath can kind of press into your ball or help you find a little place. We're just going to explore. We'll do a couple minutes on one side and then the other. Remember those movements with our hips. You can play with those on this one. Little tuck, arch, little pelvic circles. I find it interesting, like when you start doing that, you start to really feel how what feels like low back, right? It might be what we call our low back really affects our hips. And you can tell when you start moving your hips around, like, oh yeah, I can feel that connection. We'll just do a couple more breaths on this side. So feel free to play, do some rocks, do some little like shimmies or shifts. And then let's take our ball out and do our little check movement. So we'll come back, wiggle your hips around, maybe do a little tuck and arch. Move around. Notice how the difference between one side and the other. And then of course you'll want to do the other side. So you can shift enough that you can get that ball kind of on that top edge of that hip bone and then kind of roll it towards your spine. You'll kind of hit that band of muscle that lays outside of your spine. And then you can start exploring the pressure. So I'm on my left side, so I'll open my left leg to adjust my pressure. And everybody's different how much you'll want. Right? Each side is different. Sometimes one side is dramatically different than the other. And then you can explore movement. Remember that my right leg is my leg. It can shimmy me. It can I can push into the mat and I can kind of rock with it. Move around in space. And as always, not a right or wrong. We're just exploring. Okay? The only wrong ever is if something just doesn't plain feel good, don't do it. Adjust it. Sometimes it's just moving your ball a little, being in a different spot. Do what works for your body. Maybe explore some of that tuck and arch and some of that shimming around. I was just appreciating how on my other side, my tuck and arch, I felt it, but it wasn't, I don't know, as extreme. But this side, I was like, oh, I can really tell. It might be a little tighter. And I start trying to move my hips around with that ball in that place. Let's do like 2 more breaths here, just exploring. And remember, this could work with other balls as well. This could work. Sometimes I will do like both balls in a bag. If you have a softer ball, right? If you have like maybe a ball that you roll your foot out on, sometimes that's nice on this. That has a little more give to it. All right, when you're ready, come on back. Take your ball out. Give those hips a little wiggle. Give them a little tuck and arch. I want us to flip over and do our psoas with our ball. So this is the one we're going to be laying face down on the ball. That psoas is that hip flexor muscle that really runs on the inside of our hip, attaches to our spine. So what you're going to do is feel around and find that bony part of your hip on one side, and then take the ball like just to the inside of it. And then you're going to lay on your ball. Always the fun part, right? So laying close to your mat will feel less intense. Lifting your body up right? More of an extension or like almost like a swan in our Pilates work, that will feel like more pressure. You may just want to be there and not do anything. You may want to explore some movement. That could be wiggling your hips, a little shake side to side. Could be bending your leg and then exploring some movement with your leg, like a windshield wiper, kind of side to side. Maybe some circle. Maybe a combination of hip shimmy and leg movement. Come back to your breath as we're doing this and just notice how it feels. To kind of check in, explore some movement, some of that self-massage pressure. You can curl your toe under and lift your whole leg, your knee up off of the mat. That will be a little more intense. Warning. Play with that. Nice big breath. As we're here. Let's do 2 more breaths. And remember, if you like to come up a little propped, that's okay. Lots of options on there. You're just exploring. Maybe lifting the leg up and lowering it, shimmying around. And then let's take a moment just to take the ball out and just lay face down there on your mat for a moment and see what you feel. See if you notice a difference. Maybe you do a little lift or wiggle of your hips around. Oh, makes a difference for me. And then let's switch and do the other side. So remember, you kind of find your bony hip, and then take that ball to the inside, and then ease your way into laying on it. Options as you get there, you can just lay there, just be there. And I will say that oftentimes that is enough, right? You'll just let your body kind of be nice and heavy and sink in and feel that ball. I don't know, to me it feels like it kind of sucks up in there a little bit. And of course, at any point, if you want to add some movement in, you can add some movement. You can shimmy your hips, maybe not even doing your legs, just kind of exploring, wiggling your hips side to side. You could play with some leg movements, bent leg, little windshield wiper, or circle the leg just to see how that plays with that pressure. You could curl your toe under and lift your thigh and knee up off the mat. That, of course, will be much more pressure. You can bring yourself more upright, which of course will be a little more pressure at any angle. Don't feel like you have to come way up. Sometimes just a little bit is all it takes. Okay, and just explore for you and that side. Sometimes I like a little just shift my whole body, kind of get that ball moving around inside that hip space. Not a right or wrong, just your time to find what works for you. Let's do 2 more breaths there. And then always the best moment, take that ball out, lay on your mat for a moment and just see what you feel. Hopefully both sides are all loose now. And let's come up and let's just do like a little cat check-in. And this is just our time to see like, how do those hips feel after we spent all that time moving them, massaging all the areas around them. Drop your head, round your back. Reverse it, lift your head, arch, and do a little gaze up. Take some big breath as you're doing those and just coordinating your breath with your movement. And then that reach. Let's do one more. Inhale around the back, push away. Exhale into that arch. Ooh, let's add just a little wag of our hips side to side. Just kind of squeeze your shoulder and your hip together. Both side to side. Ooh, I don't know about anybody else, but hips and my low back just feel lots better. Like just more ease in them. And then as you're ready, just push yourself up and roll yourself back up. And then we are off at time. Thank you guys for joining me this week for some hip rolling and releasing. I hope everybody has a great week.